Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Amid the escalating tensions between the US and Russia and the US's Western allies over the Ukraine conflict, we have seen an exchange of strong words between the officials of the US and China. The Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi, during his meeting with US Secretary of State Mr. Antony Blinken on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, said that the US should promote the political settlement and the peaceful settlement of the Ukraine crisis instead of adding fuel to the fire. At the same time, Secretary Blinken said the US is very much concerned that China is considering providing lethal assistance to Russia, which would have serious consequences in our relationship. Now, of course, China has denied this, with its president, Mr. Xi Jinping, is likely to address and make a peace speech on the first anniversary of the start of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine on the 24th of February. Now, China has refrained earlier from condemning Moscow's operation in the Ukraine. At the same time, we have seen that the Russian president, Mr. Vladimir Putin, has said Russia is locked in existential battle with the arrogant West, and the West wants to carve up Russia and steal its vast natural resources. At the same time, we have seen Russian Defense Ministry has warned that Ukraine is planning to stage a false flag nuclear incident. Now, the West has denied both these accusations, saying it is a cynical attempt to spread disinformation. Earlier, we saw the bulletin of atomic scientists move the hands of the doomsday clock closer to midnight, which stands at 90 seconds to midnight now, which is the closest ever to a global catastrophe it has ever been. In today's program, we'll try to understand that what the major powers need to do to de-escalate the situation and avoid a global catastrophe, or is a third world war in the making, and how serious is the threat of a nuclear exchange between the major powers. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Brigadier Retired Mohammad Zeeshan. He's Director General, Center for Peace, Security and Developmental Studies. Brigadier Zeeshan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype at the same time, we are being joined by Mr. Najm Saqib, his former ambassador. Mr. Saqib, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Brigadier Zeeshan, if you allow me, let me begin with Mr. Najm Saqib. Now, Mr. Saqib, we know that the relations between China and the US are already tense. Now, with this exchange of strong words between the officials of China and the US, do you think there is an addition of a new dimension to an already tense and strained relationship between China and the US?
Thank you, Jawad. You are absolutely on the spot. Yes, there has been an escalation, and these two-way allegations we have been seeing, and let me go back a little back to last year's Brussels NATO conference, which was headed by President Joe Biden. That was the first time that openly the United States of America, followed by the entire NATO countries, they said that China and Russia, particularly China, has to be contained. All of us, we knew about the China containment policy, but that was the first time ever that the entire world heard President Joe Biden saying that China has to be contained, and all the European Union countries, the entire Europe, the NATO countries have to actually support that. Secondly, the second agenda item in that was that Russia has to be snubbed also, because and this is before the Ukraine war started. So if we start from there till today, and these balloons roaming over in the space of Canada and United States, and then Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the United States, her visit to Taiwan, then the situation in the South China Sea. If you see the entire global picture, you would see that there is a clear-cut demarcation. The battle lines have already been drawn. So there is a trade war going on also, between China and the US. There has been a talk, as you have said, that there has been a talk of Third World War, or at least the Cold War. Now, how should we go about it as an international community or people? Normally what happens is if there is, a conflict between two countries, you go to the United Nations. When the Ukraine war started, which started with two different distinct, viewpoints. One said invasion. For instance, the United States said it is an invasion of a European country. The Russian Federation said, no, it is not invasion. It is a special military operation. So that is how it started. They went to the United Nations. United Nations, there was a voting system. So, Russia, of course, vetoed that. And the United States of America came to know that, countries like India, Pakistan, and all these, they would like to stay neutral. Half of the world was on this side. The other half was on, the silent mode. Now, what do we do now? These countries are the countries, for instance, China, Russian Federation, the United States of America, UK, France, Germany, etc. Particularly those P5 members of the the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Now, if two of them are involved in a war like Ukraine, what do you do and where does the buck stop? To me, I think sanity needs to prevail. Sanity needs to prevail. All these conspiracy theories and all these allegations, counter allegations. Now, this is serious what you just mentioned, fueling the fire. Now, this is direct, an indication to the United States of America that enough is enough. Don't come into it that way. On the other hand, America says that Russia and some other countries also, including a couple of countries from South Asia also, they are helping, supporting Ukraine surreptitiously, secretly, etc. To cut it short, Jawad, I would present, to a very simple formula. Can we decide on one thing, that no country can invade any other country no matter what? The Russian experts, the think tanks, they say when the United States of America goes to, Kabul, for instance, or they went to Vietnam, or there was a World War I, World War II, and we have seen invasions from the United States of America. Why the world is now? No, this is one theory. The other theory is, except for the United States of America, no country can invade any other country. So Russia has told us in the recent past that yes, there is another country which would like to, keep its national interest intact. May it be Belarus, may it be Crimea, may it be Ukraine. So we are at, dead end. We can just be a mere spectator. These powerful countries have to decide where are they heading to, and all indications are we are heading to a disaster which is not yet, the contours of that disaster are not known. But the situation in South China Sea, the trade war, the civil, the Cold War, etc., and the world nuclear coming into discussion. We are heading towards a very, very disastrous situation, the contours of which I don't know, you don't know, but this must stop. And these countries are the ones who started this war. These countries are the ones who are, liable to stop it now.
Right, Mr. Najm Saqib, let me proceed with the discussion. Brigadier Zeeshan, Mr. Najm Saqib has shed light quite in detail on this particular issue, the history, the context of it. Now, when the US expresses its concern, like that China is considering providing lethal assistance to Russia, which would have serious consequences in their relationship. Now, we have seen China has refrained so far from condemning this particular conflict or the special operation which was carried out by Russia into Ukraine. Does it mean when China doesn't want to go into this conflict as a party, it is an attempt on the part of the US to drag China into this conflict?
I'll go back about, say a year back. 3 weeks before the invasion or the military operation of Russia into Ukraine, 3 weeks before that, there was a a strategic agreement, a partnership agreement was signed between Russia and China, which commonly is understood as a limitless kind of a partnership.
Right.
It is said that at that time, President Xi Jinping didn't know actually that Russians are going to go for a full-scale military operation in Ukraine. However, after that, as you have highlighted, still, China has not called this military operation an invasion, which is the demand of United States that it should be termed as Russian invasion into Ukraine. Now, as you are asking that whether the United States is trying to induce or pull in China into this conflict, I can't comment upon it very clearly, but I would like to highlight few aspects in order to understand what is happening. Last Monday, Joe Biden visited Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. He announced $500 million of military aid. Whatever has been said by Chinese foreign minister is in front of us, and the lethal weapons which Americans, United States officials are warning against, which China may provide to Russia. Apart from all these aspects, there is an issue of Taiwan in South China Sea. There is a discussion whether the Russian-style military operation can be replicated in Taiwan by China. What will US do? This is a discussion in the United States, which is generally, China doesn't have to do that. China has other options also in order to control the Taiwan issue. But one thing is pretty clear, that the evolving situation due to the Ukraine war between US and Russia and US and China, US is going to encounter two enemies in future.
At the same time?
At the same time.
But it has its Western allies in the European continent as well. So does this mean that the world is sliding towards that very position where we see a clear divide between East and the West?
We may not see the clear divide between East and the West because of the economic and trade aspects in 21st century. We may find European nations siding with United States, but they would like to continue their trade relations with China, at least. And this two-front scenario, or two-front scenario is the wrong term here, sorry. Having Russia and China at the same time as enemies by the United States is not a very good scenario for US itself. So I do not find this conflict of Ukraine going to a level where China is directly involved with the United States.
So don't you think there should be a realization among the US authorities that two enemies at the same time, confronting them, it's not going to be serving their own interest in the longer run?
Let's zoom out a little bit from this Ukraine crisis. Look at the 21st century evolving order. United States has to exert itself in order to maintain its control over the world politics through a financial and economic mechanism which is in place today. Now, when I'm talking of financial mechanism, an interesting development has happened recently in Davos. Chinese have suggested for a international financial mechanism which does not have one dominant power, and rest of the people are forced to abide by the terms dictated by United States. They want a model as we have in UN Security Council, that the major powers of the world have equal say. Now this is very interesting, and it has a lot of traction in Europe also. United States is not at all happy with that. Now these are the conflicts and competitions happening in various spheres of the global politics, economics, trade, and financial mechanisms. Within that, US has to exert itself in order to maintain that control over the developments or proceedings through their financial, economic, and trade institutions. Now, China itself also has to exert, because China needs to open up a little bit, especially when it goes into Europe. And in that scenario, China needs internationally recognized mechanism. China does not want to enforce its terms like Russians have tried to enforce in Ukraine. Understand the Chinese style is different in doing things. So what I want to conclude here in my argument that in foreseeable future, we don't see China directly conflicting with the United States, but China will also exert against the US pressure or against the US strategies which are developing to corner China.
Right. Mr. Najm, Saqib, what do you think? I mean, is it an attempt on the part of the US authorities to drag China into this particular Ukraine conflict, also by the kind of the statement by the Secretary Blinken that we have seen that China is contemplating to provide Russia with the lethal assistance?
You know, when we talked about the no-limit partnership, the United States of America knew that both these countries are on board. Let's not talk about the history of animosity between Russia and China. Let's see the ground reality right now. Right now, China and Russia are on board. They have signed a strategic, agreement. And when Russia invaded or started its operation in Ukraine, China was on Russia's side. Although they had certain reservations, but they did not condemn it. What does it mean? It means that as far as political and military and plus strategic interests are concerned, in that area, China feels, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the spokesperson of the Chinese government, but it looks, China feels that Russia has some kind of right over that particular area where Belarus is, or Crimea, for instance. Nobody spoke anything when Russia actually subjugated that area. Now it has been 1 year, and besides China, there are many other countries who do not want to come into it. But your question that why would America like to drag China in it, because an enemy's enemy is a friend and a friend's enemy is an enemy. This is very simple. For instance, China itself is an enemy of the United States of America and all of us too. So whatever can embarrass China politically, diplomatically, internationally, United States will not hesitate. Similarly, if there is something which is going against America, for instance, the Chinese viewpoint might be this, that why are you providing this 500 million, 100 million military aid to that? Why? The question is, if this war started, there is a conspiracy theory that the West was actually, played a very pivotal, important role in actually instigating the Russian Federation to go into this war. There is one theory. There is another theory that it was a pre-planned thing, but the fact remains that it is happening. It's been 1 year now. Now, China would like to safeguard its interest. It has got its own dynamics, its own paradigm, its own style. China would never like to invade any country unless it is absolutely, to safeguard its own interest. China's interest in the South China Sea, particularly with reference to Taiwan, that is why we would say that the United States of America would keep on provoking China, and Nancy Pelosi's visit was an absolute, glaring example that she was there unannounced, and then we saw Chinese missiles, flying over Taiwan, etc., etc. The red line is Taiwan, as far as China is concerned, vis-a-vis the United States of America. If tomorrow, Jawad, something happens from within Taiwan or on Taiwan, over Taiwan, you will see China coming into it full-blooded. what I have understood from the Chinese traditions, which are continuing even if they have this, President Xi Jinping is a very strong man. He had actually last year stated that if anyone would force us, actually to go into a war, or somebody would, attack our national interest, their heads will be smashed with this Chinese wall, the Great Wall. Even then, the style is different. We are peaceful. That's why more than 66 countries, Chinese program of BRI is going on, including CPAC in Pakistan. Now, the United States of America could not find a way out as far as the trade, commerce, investment, etc., is concerned, because the interests of China, even the European countries, they would not like to sever relationship with China because their trade interest, the stakes are very high. The rest of the world is in any case benefiting from China. Now, under the circumstances, what are the options for United States strategists? What should they do? This is what they can do. And as far as Russia is concerned, Russia has told the second time in the recent history. First was Crimea, second is Ukraine. That whatever is our national interest, we are going ahead with this, no matter how much damage our economy will face, no matter what happens. And if somebody wants to come in front direct, in a warlike condition, we are ready.
Right.
As long as Vladimir Putin is there, you would not find Russia moving an inch from there. And if you read Vladimir Putin's statements over the years, he is very straightforward in his that whatever and the areas around Russia. Remember that there was a story that the NATO planes will be parked in Ukraine. That is how that area should not be intervened, should not be interfered, and Russia is very clear about this. Now,
right,
what are the options?
Mr. Najm Saqib, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. I would just like to go back to where we were having the discussion vis-a-vis China. I'll come to this aspect, that what is more important for Russia and how the Russian president, the recent statements, what do those statements depict? Now, we are expecting a peace speech by Chinese President Xi Jinping on the first anniversary of this particular operation by Russia into Ukraine. How significant that particular speech is going to be, and what might be expected out of it, and especially when it comes on that very first anniversary, that very date.
When the Chinese elected President Xi Jinping as the Secretary General of the party, and eventually the president will be the president and he will stay most probably for the rest of his life, the Chinese people confided in President Xi Jinping, and whatever he will say, it will be a law. As far as this peace speech is concerned, everybody is waiting for that. I am, one of those people who would like to see if there is any change of China's policy of 2040 or 2050. I think they are, as a rule, they are going to speak about the prosperity and peace, and the peaceful means, should be used for any conflict, etc., etc. That has been Chinese policy forever, and I am expecting the reiteration of what China has been telling in the United Nations or otherwise in their State of the Union speeches, or whenever something important happens. They are very clear in this. They do not want war. They want peace. But if somebody imposes war on China, China would be retaliating it in the same coin. And that has been a policy of China forever. And now the only thing is, the tussle between the two powers, the sole superpower, United States of America, and number two, China, it is an open secret now. And whatever America could do to belittle China, to embarrass China, or to harm its trade and commerce and political and diplomatic interests, it would go on. China has not changed its policy, so I am expecting this peace speech as
so, Mr. Najm Saqib, do you think this speech will help reduce the tensions vis-a-vis Ukraine conflict?
There I don't agree with that. It will not, because this is not going to be a speech which will be heard very nicely and very, with open and patient ears in Washington. The battle lines have already been drawn. As far as Ukraine war is concerned, Russia is clear. United States is clear that it would not go into actual war unless some chemical weapons, unless some nuclear weapons are used, which is a far cry, by the way. So China itself is also, it knows, its limits when its national interest, which, and read when I say national interest, you read, Taiwan particularly. When that thing is hurt, China will be in it with full force. This is, number two. Number three is that United States of America, the Russian Federation, the European Union, and to some extent the United Nations, they have done that homework. They have gone through this, and they know that it is only Russia, not China. It is only Russia which started this war, which can stop this war. No other country, and I will include even China in it, no other country can stop this war as far as the Russian point of view is concerned, or Russian operation is concerned.
Right. Let me take Brigadier Zeeshan's view on this particular thing. The peace speech by President Xi Jinping expected on this first anniversary of the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. What to expect from that? Is there any likelihood that it could help reduce the tensions vis-a-vis Ukraine?
I would largely agree with Ambassador Najm Saqib. I would just add that this peace speech will be basically more inward-looking about the Chinese economy and the problems they are facing within China. However, we do expect a very careful expression of Chinese annoyance, or you may say concern, of the Ukraine war, and it is the likelihood of the disaster if it expands further or escalates further in terms of the use of force. One thing I want to also highlight here, that Chinese have given their mind already through the concept of indivisible security, where they have clearly defined their policy that no country should have a right to invade another country or another geography outside their borders in order to address their security. Now, this is a very careful expression against the US policies and US military applications all across the world.
Right. You just mentioned this particular principle of indivisible security. I would want you to shed a little bit of light on this particular with the historical context on it. Now, when we talk about President Xi Jinping's speech, you mentioned there is going to be focused inwardly primarily, but there happens to be a symbolic significance. This speech is going to be made on that very anniversary of the Ukraine and Russia conflict.
Point is that Chinese diplomacy is very selective when they want to express their concerns. They are very cautious. They don't want to unnecessarily involve into this conflict and take a side of Russia where they become directly entangled with the West, particularly United States. You may say that United States is trying to entangle China to corner them, but Chinese will try to avoid it. So there will be certain mention based on these Chinese principles, but they will not go beyond indirect mention.
Right. Now, China, as you have already mentioned, the indivisible security principle. Now, there is a global security initiative that has been launched by China, which basically focuses on this particular principle of indivisible security. We saw Russia had an agreement. It insists the Western countries to abide by that agreement that was signed in 1999 based on the principle of indivisible security. So, vis-a-vis Russia, when we talk about this principle of indivisible security, what do we make of it? How Russia can insist the Western countries to abide by it if it is carrying out itself a special operation in Ukraine beyond its borders?
When you get into the strategic or academic strategic discussion, Russia has a very strong case in terms of this recent conflict. When the Soviet Union dissolved, it was there were certain promises made by the West also, and the promises were that the near frontiers of Russia will not be invaded or influenced to an extent where there will be military presence of NATO in the near frontiers. So near frontiers are those countries which are bordering Russia. Now, what happened just after that, one after another, the countries, smaller countries of Europe went into NATO, and they became part of European Union also. Russians were voicing their concerns since some decades, and ultimately, as the leading strategists, even in the United States, say that this Russian military operation or Russian invasion of Ukraine has been induced by United States. Now, Russians do not mince words when it comes to their security. They will not care for any kind of principle. However, when we talk of China, we will find China abiding by this principle, because Chinese historically have never invaded any country, and neither do they have any design in 21st century also. So considering that, this aspect is going to be highlighted in the peace speech of President Xi Jinping, and it will be a matter of debate subsequently.
Right, Mr. Najm Saqib, would you like to shed a bit of light on this principle of indivisible security? The global security initiative now in form of paper released by China, and Russia also insists the Western countries to abide by a 1999 agreement that is based on this principle.
You know, as a student of political science and as a diplomat who served his country for 35 years, attended so numerous conferences, United Nations, etc., I can tell you one thing very clearly, and that is that signing a document, agreeing on certain things, or passing a resolution means absolutely nothing when it comes to the crunch. When your national interest is hurt, you don't go back to international law. By the way, when we talk about this indivisible security, etc., in international law, in the United Nations Security Council, you go anywhere and you will see a standardized, phrase that we should respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the other countries. Full stop. We don't need to, elaborate this. This is something which has been agreed upon, not with consensus, agreed upon unanimously. And there are, a plethora of resolutions in the United Nations Security Council, particularly in the General Assembly, which say that all countries should remain within their limits. But have they? The question is, one is signing an agreement, you see, sorry, from political and military, areas to climate change. You will see that they get together, they decide something, a resolution is passed, an agreement is made, and then suddenly something happens. And we see an Afghanistan, a Vietnam, for instance. Everyone knew that the territorial integrity has to be respected, but is India doing that? What was this, Abhinandan incidents? What was this BrahMos, this cruise missile accidentally fired? And nobody talked about anything, nobody said anything, particularly the United States of America, which is, very much concerned about the nuclear aspect in the, as they consider that these two nuclear powers, there is a clash between the two nuclear flashpoint, etc. Why didn't they react on that? So saying something, on paper writing something, and doing, they are two different, diametrically opposite things. So I will, complete my argument here that do read all those agreements, do read all those resolutions, but they are applicable only when it suits you. If
Right.
the United States of America, for instance, their arsenal ammunition making companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, if it suits them that this war should continue, I assure you, it will continue.
Right, you already mentioned, Mr. Najm Saqib, there are two conspiracy theories you were highlighting, that there are certain strategies. One of those is that it was all pre-planned and the West induced this war to go ahead. A similar sort of a remark given by Brigadier Zeeshan also. Now, when we compare these things, that some certain strategies are of the view that it was pre-planned and it was induced by the West, particularly led by the US. Now, this statement by President Putin goes on to say that Russia would continue its operation in Ukraine, but Russia did try to avoid the war, but it was Ukraine which was planning to attack Crimea. So what do we make a sense out of it?
You know, conspiracy theories have a particular role in international relations. They are sometimes floated as a preamble to what is going to happen. And suddenly you will see that there would be, certain analysts and strategists in Washington, in New York, in United States of America, or, in UK, France, and Germany, writing articles, making, the preamble of the scene that we are absolutely sure that Russia is going to attack Ukraine, for instance. So the atmosphere, the ambiance, the aura is created. This is one, strategic tool that is being used for years, for centuries. Now,
right.
Since that thing happens, these strategists say, these analysts say, look, we told you. On the other hand, Russia, for instance, or any other country with that much power, they would like to, see, when Vladimir Putin thinks about Russia, it thinks about the Soviet Union. It thinks about all these CIS countries, all these Central Asian states countries, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, etc., and then Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia, etc., as part of the whole Russian Federation. This is his dream. Now, to implement his dream, naturally he is prepared. Belarus is on the Russian side. Crimea, it has already taken. And most probably, there will be some result in favor of Russia when this Ukraine war is over. What else is there? All these countries, either Central Asian states or the CIS states, they are, whenever they want to go beyond a certain point, they look up to Russia, because Russia is there to safeguard their interests. They would like to have pro-Western policies, but there are limitations. So when you see Ukraine war or the area, the strategic planning and all that, Russia is very clear, and I reiterate, as long as Vladimir Putin is there in power at the helm of affairs, rest assured that he will be thinking about, dreaming about the greater Soviet Union, which used to be once. And that is one big worry for the West. Similarly, as we, this is just a passing remark. India is thinking about the, the greater India, including Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, etc. Let it dream, and let Russia also dream. But in the meantime, what Pakistan has to see, we haven't talked about it, that what should be Pakistan's stance right now on Ukraine war, for instance. Look, we have a very dear friend in the war indirectly, and that is China. We are mending ways with the Russian federations. United States of America is our largest export destination. We need the United States of America on our side when it comes to India, etc., etc. Now, it's a very precarious situation. Whatever the policy should be, it should not be siding with any party. It should be, an aggressive neutrality, that we are concerned with peace and prosperity in the region. And as far as the Ukraine war is concerned, it is between the United States of America and Russia. We would like both countries that sanity should prevail and there should be a peaceful political agreement of this conflict. This, to my understanding, this should be our political and the policy statement. Secondly, we should avoid those situations in which India or any other enemy would like to drag us and stating all these allegations. No, Pakistan is helping Ukraine, Pakistan is helping United States of America, Pakistan. We should avoid that. So these two things, I think from Pakistan point of view, I would like Islamabad to follow this policy.
Right. Brigadier Zeeshan, when President Putin says that the West is looking forward to carve Russia out to steal its vast natural resources, of course, it's been rejected by the West, and they say that NATO expansion eastwards is no justification. What they say is an imperial style of land grab.
To great extent, as I said earlier, Russia has a case here. And the US case will be weaker and weaker day by day in terms of ensuring that Ukraine gets into NATO. What I foresee, in my opinion, that this conflict is going to drag. It is going to drag for a decade at least, something close to that. But at the end, Russia will find a geography as a buffer. A part of Ukraine will get on the Russian side, as Crimea is on the south, and in the east, in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, Russians have military influence over there. They have military control over there.
So, but there have been some reversals for the Russians.
The reversals have been really small, and they have been projected as a large-scale counteroffensive by Western media, which is not true on ground. Whenever you see what is happening in Ukraine, there are maps available on the net. There are not much reversals. I would just conclude my point by saying that this war will drag on, this conflict, but at the end, there will be a solution where they will have to give something to Russia.
Right.
Two aspects more which we have to understand and highlight here. The destruction of Nord Stream 1, which was, it was basically bypassing Ukraine, and that cheap Russian gas was going to Germany and Western Europe directly. After that destruction, the conspiracy theory is that United States deep sea divers have done that. Recently, about a week back, we have seen one train carrying chemicals in Ohio and another one near Maryland. They have been derailed. Another conspiracy theory on social media is that the Russians are responsible for that. So these are the things which will now happen more than often.
Right. Now, when we talk about the G7 particularly, its finance ministers are going to meet on 23rd of February, and that particular meeting is going to focus on enhancing the effect of sanctions against Russia, prompting it to withdraw from Ukraine. So do we understand that whatever already the sanctions have been imposed against Russia, they haven't served their purpose? So that's why they are going to review this particular option also.
This is basically a political, I may use the term gimmick, in order to justify to their audience that we are very serious in isolating Russia and sanctioning the Russian economy. They will take certain steps, yes, but still they are buying oil and gas from Russia, Europe, and there is no problem of India buying oil and gas from Russia. So where it is going to be enforced, that is to be seen.
Right. Mr. Najm Saqib, your take regarding the sanctions which have already been imposed by the Western countries on Russia haven't served their purpose. That's why they are going to review that in the next meet on 23rd of February.
You know, Jawad, I must highlight here quickly a very peculiar aspect of Russian strategy and Russian thinking. They are chess players, very good chess players. When they do something, they calculate. They calculate that here we have to be aggressive, here we have to be in defense, and their defense would always be offensive defense. This has been the Russian strategy all over these decades, that we have seen. So to my knowledge, I think that Russia has already calculated the risk. Russia has calculated the losses, economic, political, goodwill, whatever.
So, Mr. Najm, Saqib, beg your pardon for the interjection. We are unfortunately short of time. I just want to take your take on this. Is nuclear exchange a serious threat? We see Russians also saying that Ukraine is planning to stage a false flag nuclear incident also.
That nuclear thing or this, Cold War going into actually hot waters would always be there. But as, a student of political science and strategy, I would say that it would have been disastrous, number one, but all these, countries, they are responsible countries. I think that they would refrain till the last extent, till the last moment, they would like to refrain from entering into the nuclear zone.
Right, Brigadier Zeeshan, your quick take regarding this. As Russians say, that material, a dirty bomb for that material has already been transported to Ukraine, and Ukraine is planning to launch a false flag nuclear incident to accuse Russia of indiscriminately firing at the radioactive facilities.
Russians have been really calculative while using force in Ukraine. They haven't used their lethal weapons. They haven't bombed and destroyed the power infrastructure in Ukraine and road infrastructure. They have been very selective in picking up their targets in Ukraine other than the military. So there is not much, context available for such kind of a false flag. False flag has to create an environment, and then false flag will be, accepted as a truth. So Russian concerns must be there, but I think nothing more than a chemical false flag.
Right. Brigadier retired Mohammad Zeeshan, Director General, Center for Peace, Security and Development Studies. Thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Joining us in the studio and on Skype, we were joined by Mr. Najm Saqib, former ambassador. Mr. Saqib, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. And with that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.